The paralyzed 4-year-old son of the billionaire wouldn't stop crying during a business meeting until a poor 7-year-old girl rushed in and fed the baby, calming him for the first time since the accident. Before anything else, type in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more tear-jerking stories. The crying was unbearable. It pierced through the mahogany doors of the Blackwood Financial Group's conference room, making the PowerPoint presentation on quarterly projections seem utterly irrelevant. James Blackwood, founder and CEO, tried to maintain his composure, but the muscles in his jaw tightened with each wail that echoed down the corridor. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess," suggested Elizabeth Carter, his chief financial officer, shooting a sympathetic glance toward the door. James nodded stiffly. 10 minutes. As the executives filed out, their whispers barely concealed, James loosened his tie and strode toward the executive suite's adjacent room, where Mrs. Thompson, the nurse, was attempting to soothe 6-year-old Michael. His son's face was flushed, tears streaming down his cheeks, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. The specially designed wheelchair stood like a monument to their tragedy. "He's been inconsolable for over an hour," Mrs. Thompson said apologetically. "I've tried everything." James ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "It's okay. We'll reschedule the meeting." He knelt beside his son, his voice softening. "Hey, buddy. Dad's here." Michael's crying continued unabated, his tiny body shaking with each sob. The commotion at the reception desk barely registered until security's voices rose above Michael's cries. "Miss, you can't go in there. This is a private area." A small figure darted past the guard, a blur of faded blue dress and untamed honey-blonde curls. She couldn't have been more than 7, with scuffed sneakers and determined hazel eyes. "He's hungry?" the girl announced, marching straight to Michael. "That's why he's crying." James blinked, momentarily speechless at the intrusion. "Who are you? How did you get up here?" The girl ignored him, focusing entirely on Michael. "Hi, I'm Emma. You want to share my sandwich?" She pulled a slightly squashed peanut butter sandwich from her backpack. "My dad says food fixes everything." To James's astonishment, Michael's sobs began to subside as he stared at the unexpected visitor. Emma broke off a small piece of sandwich and held it toward Michael's lips. Without hesitation, Michael accepted it. "See?" "Hungry?" Emma said matter-of-factly, continuing to feed him small bites. "My teacher says it's hard to think when your tummy's empty." James watched in disbelief as his son, who had rejected food from Mrs. Thompson all morning, quietly accepted each morsel from this strange little girl. The security guard hovered uncertainly at the doorway. "Sir, should I?" James held up a hand, silencing him. He couldn't take his eyes off the scene or the girl's face. The resemblance was uncanny. Those same hazel eyes, the subtle tilt of her nose, the way her hair caught the light. She looked remarkably like Sarah, like his wife, who had been gone for 2 years now. "What's your name again?" James asked softly. "Emma Wilson," she replied, still focused on Michael, who had fallen completely silent now. "He has pretty eyes. They look sad, though." James felt something shift inside him, a crack in the ice that had encased his heart since the accident. "Emma, where are your parents?" "My dad's fixing your building's heating system downstairs. I was supposed to wait in the lobby, but I heard him crying." She gestured to Michael. "I don't like when people cry alone." Michael reached for Emma's hand, his first voluntary movement of the day. "Well," James said, his voice suddenly hoarse, "thank you for helping Michael. I think he'd like it if you stayed a while." The April rain tapped gently against the windows of James Blackwood's Beacon Hill home, a rhythmic counterpoint to the animated chatter coming from the sunroom. 2 weeks had passed since Emma Wilson had marched into his office and performed what his executive team now jokingly called the sandwich miracle. James stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, watching as Emma read a picture book to Michael, whose wheelchair was positioned beside her on the window seat. And then the dragon said... Emma lowered her voice to a comical growl, causing Michael to smile, that rare, precious smile that had been absent for so long. After discovering that Robert Wilson, Emma's father, was a contractor with the building's maintenance company, James had engineered a reason to have him work on the heating system in his home. It was transparent, perhaps, but it gave him a legitimate reason to have Emma visit again and again. Mrs. Thompson approached, keeping her voice low. His physical therapist says he's showing more responsiveness. Dr. Matthews thinks having Emma visit has been therapeutic. James nodded, his throat tight. She brings something out in him that none of us can. She reminds you of Sarah, Mrs. Thompson observed gently. James didn't answer. The resemblance between Emma and his late wife was something he'd avoided discussing. It seemed impossible, this random child with Sarah's eyes, Sarah's laugh, even Sarah's habit of tucking hair behind her ear when concentrating. Sometimes when Emma turned quickly, his heart would stop, the similarity so striking it was like seeing a ghost. "Mr. Blackwood?" Robert Wilson's voice came from behind him. The man looked uncomfortable in the opulent setting, his work clothes a stark contrast to the antique furniture and original artwork. "I've finished with the upstairs bathroom fixtures, all good now." James turned, extending his hand. "Thank you, Robert. And please, it's James." Robert nodded, though the formality didn't leave his posture. "Emma hasn't been any trouble, has she?" "Quite the opposite," James assured him. "She's remarkable with Michael." Robert's weather-worn face softened as he looked at his daughter. "She's got a way about her. Always has." He hesitated. "Listen, I appreciate you giving me these extra jobs, but I don't want Emma bothering your son." "She's not bothering anyone," James said quickly, too quickly. "In fact, I was hoping to make an arrangement. Michael's therapists think Emma's presence is beneficial. Would you consider letting her visit regularly? I'd compensate you both for your time, of course." Robert's expression closed slightly. "We don't need charity, Mr. Blackwood." "It's not charity," James insisted. "It's a fair exchange. Emma helps Michael in ways trained professionals haven't been able to. That's valuable." Before Robert could respond, a small crash came from the sunroom. Both men rushed in to find a vase toppled, water spilled across the marble floor. Emma stood frozen, wide-eyed. "I'm sorry." "Michael wanted to see the flowers closer, and when I tried to move them—" "It's fine, sweetheart," Robert said quickly, already moving to clean up. "Please, let the staff handle it," James said. But Robert was already sopping up water with his handkerchief. "We clean up our own messes," Robert said quietly, not meeting James's eyes. James noticed Michael's face crumpling, tears threatening. The boy had been so easily overwhelmed since the accident, the slightest disruption sending him spiraling. But before James could intervene, Emma was kneeling in front of Michael's wheelchair. "Hey, it's just water. No big deal," she said cheerfully. "Remember in the book? When the dragon knocked over the knight's castle? Sometimes accidents happen." Michael's breathing steadied as he focused on Emma's face. James felt the familiar ache in his chest, watching his son connect with this child in ways he couldn't seem to reach him, the same way Sarah had always known exactly what Michael needed. The resemblance wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something that made James's skin prickle with a sensation between wonder and fear. "Mr. Wilson," James said suddenly, "I have a proposition that might benefit us all." Emma's sneakers dangled above the polished floor as she sat on the examination table in Dr. Winter's office. The pediatric neurologist had a kind face and a bow tie with tiny giraffes on it that made Emma smile despite her nervousness. "So, Emma, Mr. Blackwood tells me you're very good at helping Michael," Dr. Winters said, making notes on his tablet. Emma shrugged. "I just talk to him normal. Everyone else treats him like he's a baby or something." "Doctor, Winters nodded thoughtfully. That's very wise of you. And Mr. Blackwood mentioned that sometimes Michael responds to you physically, moves his hands. Yeah, when he wants something. Emma kicked her feet. Yesterday he wanted the red truck, not the blue one, so he pointed. Not with his whole arm, just his finger, but I saw it. From his position near the door, James exchanged a meaningful look with Dr. Winters. Michael's voluntary movement had been minimal since the accident, the spinal injury affecting his lower body completely, but the trauma had also left him withdrawn, unresponsive even in areas where he physically could move. "Emma, would you like to see some pictures of the brain?" Dr. Winters asked, pulling up a colourful diagram on his tablet. As Emma leaned forward with interest, James slipped into the hallway where Robert Wilson waited, tension evident in his posture. "Mr. Wilson, Robert," James began. "This is too much," Robert interrupted. "Special doctors, tests, all these appointments for Emma were not part of your family." James leaned against the wall, suddenly tired. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind since he'd convinced Robert to allow Emma to spend more time with Michael. The arrangement had started simply. Emma would visit after school, while Robert worked on various repairs around James's home. But when James had noticed how Emma seemed to intuitively understand Michael's needs, he'd consulted with Michael's medical team. "Robert, I understand your concerns, but Dr. Winters isn't examining Emma. He's observing her interaction with Michael to help us understand why Michael responds to her when he doesn't respond to anyone else." Robert ran a hand through his thinning hair. "It feels like we're getting tangled in your life. Emma talks about nothing but Michael and your big house now. She's getting attached and—" He hesitated. "I worry about what happens when you don't need us anymore." The words hung heavy between them. James understood Robert's fear, a working-class single father, cautious about his daughter becoming accustomed to a lifestyle they couldn't provide, forming attachments that would inevitably be severed. "I don't see this as temporary," James said carefully. "Michael needs Emma, and I'm grateful. Grateful enough to hire me for jobs you don't need done." Robert's voice was quiet but firm. "I fix things, Mr. Blackwood. Real problems, not made-up ones, so you can have my daughter around." James felt a flash of shame. "You're right. I've been less than transparent. But my son smiled for the first time in 2 years because of Emma. He reached for a toy yesterday. Small things for most children, but milestones for Michael." Before Robert could respond, the office door opened and Emma bounded out, followed by Dr. Winters. "Dad, I saw pictures of brains. They look like weird cauliflower," Emma announced. Dr. Winters smiled at Robert. "Your daughter is quite remarkable, Mr. Wilson. She has an instinctive understanding of how to motivate Michael. We call it therapeutic resonance, when someone naturally provides the right stimuli to engage a patient." Robert placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "She's always been good with people." "I'd like to propose something," Dr. Winters said. "A more formal arrangement. Emma has an extraordinary impact on Michael's recovery potential. With your permission, I'd like to design a program where Emma participates in Michael's therapy sessions, properly compensated as a therapy aid, of course." "A job?" Robert looked skeptical. "She's 7. More like a specialized play date with purpose," Dr. Winters clarified. "Children Michael's age respond better to peers than adults, and Emma has a natural gift." Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. "Can I, Dad? I like helping Mikey." "Mikey?" James repeated, startled by the nickname only Sarah had used. "Yeah," Emma said simply. "That's what he likes to be called. He told me." "Higher, Daddy! Push me higher!" Emma's delighted squeals floated across the Blackwood Estate's sprawling back garden as Robert pushed her on the newly installed swing set. From his position on the patio, James watched them with a complicated mix of emotions. In the 6 weeks since Emma had entered their lives, the changes had been nothing short of remarkable. Michael, seated beside James in his wheelchair, tracked Emma's swinging arc with genuine interest. The vacant look that had dominated his expression for 2 years notably absent. "Want to go closer to watch Emma?" James asked his son. Michael nodded. Another new development. Simple responses, but communication nonetheless. As James wheeled Michael toward the swings, he marveled at how quickly their lives had intertwined with the Wilsons. The formal therapy program Dr. Winters had designed was showing promising results. Michael was demonstrating increased responsiveness, making deliberate movements with his upper body, and most significantly, engaging emotionally instead of withdrawing. But it wasn't just Michael who was changing. The entire atmosphere of the Blackwood home had transformed. Where silence and grief had reigned, there was now the sound of children's voices, occasional laughter, life breathing back into spaces that had felt frozen in time. "Mr. Blackwood," Mrs. Thompson approached with a cordless phone. "Your father is on the line. He's quite insistent." James suppressed a sigh. "Tell him I'll call back later. He says he's at the airport. Something about coming to assess the situation personally." James felt a knot form in his stomach. Harold Blackwood, semi-retired chairman of Blackwood Financial and Family Patriarch, had been vocally skeptical about James's recent decisions, particularly the amount of time and resources devoted to the Wilson family. "Fine," James took the phone. "Dad? What do you mean you're at the airport?" Harold Blackwood's authoritative voice crackled through the line. "I mean exactly that. Your assistant's reports have been concerning, to say the least. This arrangement you've made with the maintenance man's daughter, the board members are talking, James." "The board has no say in my personal life," James replied tightly, moving away from Michael. "They do when you're cancelling meetings to attend therapy sessions with a child who isn't even related to you. When you're distracted during quarterly planning because you're texting with doctors about Michael's new friend. Emma is helping Michael. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Harold's voice softened slightly. "Son, I understand you're still grieving Sarah. We all miss her. But this fixation on a child who resembles her, this isn't about Sarah," James cut in sharply, though the words felt hollow even to himself. "Isn't it? Elizabeth mentioned the resemblance is uncanny." "James, I'm worried you're projecting." "I'll see you when you arrive," James interrupted, ending the call. He stood motionless for a moment, trying to regain his composure before returning to Michael. When he turned, he found Robert Wilson standing nearby, his expression making it clear he'd overheard at least part of the conversation. "Your father disapproves of us being here," Robert stated flatly. James sighed. "My father disapproves of most things. Don't worry about it." "Is it true?" Robert's voice was quiet. "Does Emma remind you of your wife?" The direct question caught James off guard. They had carefully avoided this topic in all their interactions over the past weeks. "There is a resemblance," James admitted cautiously. "But that's not why—" "We should go," Robert interrupted, already moving toward the swings to collect Emma. "Robert, wait." James caught his arm. "Whatever resemblance exists, that's not why Emma is important to us. She connects with Michael in a way no one else can. Please don't take that away from him because my father is being difficult." Robert's gaze shifted to where Emma was now sitting beside Michael's wheelchair, showing him a caterpillar she'd found. Michael was fully engaged, his eyes following her animated gestures. "When Sophie died giving birth to Emma," Robert said quietly, "I thought my world had ended. For months I could barely function. Then one day I realized Emma had her mother's eyes, her smile. For a while, I couldn't look at her without seeing Sophie." James felt a chill. It was the first time Robert had mentioned Emma's mother. "How did you move past it?" James asked. "I didn't, not completely." Robert's weathered face softened. "But I learned to see Emma for herself, not as a shadow of someone gone." That's the thing about grief, Mr. Blackwood. It doesn't go away. You just build something new around it. Before James could respond, a delighted laugh from Michael, his first genuine laugh in years, drew their attention. Emma had placed the caterpillar on the tray of his wheelchair, and Michael was watching its slow progress with fascination. "Your father arrives when?" Robert asked, resignation in his voice. "Tomorrow morning." Robert nodded. "Then we have until tomorrow to decide what's best for both our children." Harold Blackwood cut an imposing figure even at 72, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, as he surveyed the scene in the Blackwood Mansion's library. Emma and Michael were on the floor with an elaborate set of building blocks, while James reviewed paperwork at his desk. The domestic tranquility clearly wasn't what Harold had expected to find. "So this is the young lady I've heard so much about," Harold said, studying Emma with undisguised scrutiny. Emma looked up, offering a smile missing 2 front teeth. "Are you Mikey's grandpa? He said you bring him robots from Japan." A flicker of softness crossed Harold's stern features. "Indeed I do. And you must be Emma." "Yup. We're building a castle with a moat and everything. Want to help?" Harold glanced at James, who was watching the interaction with thinly veiled tension. "Perhaps later. I need to speak with my son first." James rose. "Emma, can you stay with Michael for a few minutes? Mrs. Thompson will be right back with your snacks." "Sure." Emma returned to the blocks, her attention already refocused on their construction project. James led his father to his study, closing the door behind them. Harold didn't waste time on pleasantries. "She looks remarkably like Sarah," he stated bluntly. "It's unsettling." James had prepared for this. "There's a resemblance, yes. But that's not why she's here." "No? Then explain to me why you've essentially moved this child and her father into your life. Elizabeth tells me you've hired the man full-time to manage your property now. Robert is qualified. The arrangement works for everyone." James kept his voice level. "And Emma is the first person to break through to Michael since the accident. His doctors are calling it remarkable progress." Harold softened slightly. "I want Michael to improve too. But James, this feels unnatural. You're recreating a family with strangers because they fit the shapes of what you've lost." The accusation stung precisely because James had asked himself the same question countless times over the past weeks. "You haven't seen Michael in months," James countered. "He's engaging now, making eye contact, using his voice. Yesterday, he operated his wheelchair controls independently for the first time since the accident. All since Emma came into his life." Harold sighed, moving to the window that overlooked the garden where Robert Wilson was pruning the rose bushes, Sarah's roses, which had gone neglected until recently. "And what about the girl's father? How does he feel about his daughter becoming emotionally entangled with a family above their station? About you looking at his child like she's some kind of replacement?" "Robert understands Michael's needs," James said, though discomfort twisted in his stomach. The truth was more complicated. While Robert had agreed to continue the arrangement, tension lingered between them. "Does he?" Harold turned from the window. "Or is he simply a man without options, accepting a wealthy patron's interest in his daughter because it comes with financial security?" "That's unfair," James snapped. "Robert's protective of Emma. He's only allowed this arrangement because he sees how she and Michael benefit each other." Harold studied his son's face. "And what exactly is this arrangement, James? How far do you intend to take this surrogate family you're building?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as a knock came at the study door. Mrs. Thompson entered, her expression concerned. "Mr. Blackwood, I think you should come quickly. Dr. Matthews is here for Michael's session, but—" James was already moving. In the library they found Michael sobbing uncontrollably, while Dr. Matthews, the physical therapist, tried unsuccessfully to calm him. Emma stood nearby, her small face creased with worry. "What happened?" James demanded, rushing to Michael's side. "I simply explained that Emma needed to step out during the official therapy session," Dr. Matthews explained. "Insurance regulations, only family can be present during—" "He's scared," Emma interrupted, her voice small but certain. "He thinks I'm leaving forever like his mom did." The room fell silent except for Michael's sobs. James felt his father's presence behind him, observing everything. "I'm not going anywhere, Mikey," Emma said, moving to the wheelchair and taking Michael's hand. "Dr. Matt just needs to do special exercises with you. I'll be right outside the door, promise." Gradually, Michael's sobs subsided as Emma continued speaking softly to him. When he had calmed, she stepped back. "Count to 100, Mikey. By then, Dr. Matt will be done, and we can finish our castle." To everyone's amazement, Michael nodded and began counting in a shaky voice. 1, 2. As Emma slipped from the room, James followed her into the hallway. "How did you know what to say?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "That's how I felt when my mom died. Like everyone was going to disappear too." "Your mom?" James felt his heart quicken. "Robert told me she died when you were born." Emma looked up, confusion crossing her features. "Yeah, but I still remember her a little. In my dreams, mostly. She used to sing about sunflowers." Before James could process this puzzling statement, Harold appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he studied Emma. "Young lady," he said carefully, "what was your mother's name?" "Sophie," Emma replied. "Sophie Wilson. Dad has one picture of her holding me when I was born. Want to see it? It's in my backpack." The photograph trembled in James's hands. It was creased and faded, clearly cherished and frequently handled. The woman in the hospital bed held a newborn Emma, her exhausted smile radiant despite her obvious fatigue. Sophie Wilson's honey-blonde hair framed a face that bore a striking resemblance to Sarah, but it wasn't Sarah. Similar, yes, like distant cousins might appear, but distinctly different women. "I don't understand," James said, looking up at Robert, who stood uncomfortably in the center of the Blackwood Mansion's living room. Harold sat nearby, his expression grave. "What's to understand?" Robert's voice was defensive. "That's my late wife, Sophie, with Emma right after she was born. She developed complications after the delivery, hemorrhaged. They couldn't stop the bleeding. But Emma said she remembers her mother singing about sunflowers." Robert's shoulders sagged. "Emma was 3 days old when Sophie died. She doesn't actually remember her. After she started spending time here, she began saying things like that. I thought maybe she was picking up on things from your house, photos of your wife, stories Michael might have told her." "Michael barely speaks," James said. "Children communicate in many ways," Dr. Winters interjected gently. The neurologist had been called in when the situation began unfolding, and Emma is particularly intuitive. Harold cleared his throat. "The resemblance between your late wife and James's is unusual." Robert's jaw tightened. "I wouldn't know. I've never seen pictures of Mrs. Blackwood." "You haven't?" James was startled by this. Sarah's photograph sat prominently on his desk, and several portraits hung throughout the house. "I've been careful not to go where I'm not needed," Robert said stiffly. "I do my work and collect Emma. I don't snoop around your private spaces." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Emma and Michael were in the sunroom with Mrs. Thompson, intentionally kept separate from this tense adult discussion. "Where did you meet Sophie?" Harold asked suddenly. Robert frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Humor me. Boston General. I was doing maintenance work there. She was a nurse." Robert's expression softened at the memory. "We were married a year later. Emma came along 2 years after that." James exchanged a glance with his father. "Sarah volunteered at Boston General once a month, in the children's ward. It's a big hospital," Robert said dismissively. "Thousands of people work there. Dr. Winters leaned forward. Mr. Wilson, has Emma always been this intuitive? This, connected to others' emotions? Robert seemed to deflate slightly. She's always been special, knows things she shouldn't, feels things deeply. The school wanted to have her tested, said she might be highly empathic or something. And the sunflowers? James pressed. Where would that come from? I don't know. Robert stood abruptly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're looking for connections that aren't there because you want to see your wife in my daughter. Harold rose as well, his voice surprisingly gentle. No one is accusing you of anything, Mr. Wilson, but there are coincidences here that bear examination. The only coincidence is that my daughter happens to look somewhat like your daughter-in-law, and now you're building this fantasy around it. Robert's voice rose. Emma is all I have left of Sophie. She's not some reincarnation or replacement for your family's loss. James felt a cold weight in his stomach. Put so bluntly, his actions over the past week seemed uncomfortably close to what Robert was describing. Had he unconsciously been trying to recreate what he'd lost? I think we all need to calm down, Dr. Winters suggested. Whatever is happening here, the most important thing is that two children who have experienced significant trauma are helping each other heal. That's what matters. Before anyone could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. Why is everyone yelling? Emma stood there, her hazel eyes wide with concern. You're making Mikey upset. He can hear you. Robert immediately moved to his daughter. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated discussions. About me and Mikey? Emma asked, her perception unsettling. About lots of things, Robert hedged. Emma looked directly at James, her gaze disconcertingly mature. You think I'm like Mikey's mom? That's why you look sad sometimes when you watch me. The room fell silent. James felt exposed, transparent before this child's intuition. James struggled to find appropriate words. Emma continued, It's okay. Mikey showed me her picture, the one he keeps under his pillow. She's pretty. She paused. And she liked sunflowers too. Robert stared at his daughter. Emma, how would you know that? Emma shrugged. Mikey told me, not with words, he just showed me, in my head. She said it matter-of-factly, as though this was perfectly normal. Can I go back now? I told him I'd just get some water. As Robert led Emma back to the sunroom, the three men exchanged troubled glances. That child, Harold began, is extraordinary, Dr. Winters finished, and possibly the key to understanding something none of us can fully comprehend. The specialists arrived one by one over the following week. Dr. Winters had assembled what he called a multidisciplinary team to assess Emma's unusual connection with Michael. A child psychologist, a neuropsychiatrist, a specialist in trauma, and even a researcher who studied what he carefully termed extraordinary empathic phenomena in children. James watched through the one-way glass as Emma and Michael sat together at a small table, surrounded by toys and testing materials. Robert stood beside him, arms crossed, tension evident in every line of his body. She's not a lab rat, Robert muttered, not for the first time. No one's treating her like one, James assured him, though he understood the father's protective instinct. They're trying to understand what's happening. On the other side of the glass, Emma was building a structure with colored blocks, while Michael watched intently. The neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Levine, sat across from them, asking occasional questions. When did she start talking about sunflowers? Dr. Winters asked quietly. Robert shrugged. A few weeks ago, around the time she started spending more time here. And Sarah, your wife, Dr. Winters turned to James. She had a connection to sunflowers. James nodded, his throat tightening. She grew them, said they always turned to face the light no matter what. After the accident, when we were told Michael might never walk again, She planted a whole garden of them outside his window. Through the glass, they watched as Dr. Levine placed a series of cards face down on the table. "Emma, I'd like you to pick a card, but don't look at it," they heard her say through the speakers. "Just hold it against your heart." Emma dutifully selected a card, holding it against her chest. "Now, Michael, I want you to focus on Emma and tell me what you see." Michael's brow furrowed in concentration. After a long moment, he pointed shakily to his communication board and spelled S-U-N. Dr. Levine carefully kept her expression neutral as she asked Emma to turn over her card. It showed a bright sun in the center. "Lucky guess," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. They repeated the exercise 5 more times. Michael identified 4 cards correctly. "Statistical probability makes that nearly impossible," Dr. Winters murmured. In the observation room, Harold Blackwood cleared his throat. He had remained mostly silent during the tests, but now he stepped forward. "I've seen enough. James, a word?" In the hallway, Harold's expression was grave. "This is beyond unusual, son." "I know." James ran a hand through his hair. "But it's helping Michael. He's making progress." "At what cost?" Harold asked. "That child in there, Emma, she's displaying abilities that science can't explain. And her resemblance to Sarah, her knowledge of things she couldn't possibly know, it's uncanny." "What are you suggesting?" Harold sighed. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm concerned about all parties involved. The Wilson girl is being subjected to tests and examinations. Michael is becoming emotionally dependent on her. He hesitated. "You're seeing ghosts where there are none." "That's not fair," James protested, though part of him recognized the truth in his father's words. "Isn't it? Look me in the eye and tell me you haven't thought even for a moment that somehow Sarah is connected to this child." James couldn't meet his father's gaze. "The doctors will complete their assessments," Harold continued more gently. "But regardless of their findings, you need to consider what happens next. This arrangement cannot continue indefinitely." "Why not?" James demanded. "If it's helping Michael." "Because it's not just about Michael." Harold's voice rose. "That little girl has her own life, her own future. So does her father. They're not accessories to our family's healing." Before James could respond, the door to the testing room opened, and Emma emerged, running straight to her father. Robert knelt to embrace her. "Did I do good with the tests?" she asked. "You did perfect, sweetheart," Robert assured her, shooting a guarded look at the Blackwoods. Winters emerged with Michael, who looked tired but more alert than James had seen him in months. "I think that's enough for today," the doctor said. "We've gathered substantial data." "And?" James prompted. Dr. Winters glanced at Emma, then back to James. "We should discuss the preliminary findings privately." Later, in James's study, the medical team delivered their assessment. "Emma displays what we call heightened empathic resonance," Dr. Levine explained. "It's rare but documented. Her ability to intuit Michael's needs, to sense his emotions, it's exceptional but not supernatural." "And the card tests? The knowledge about Sarah?" James pressed. The doctors exchanged glances. "Children are perceptive in ways we don't fully understand," Dr. Winters said carefully. "Information transfers through subtle cues we adults miss. As for the statistical anomalies in the testing—" "You're saying there's a rational explanation," Harold interrupted. "We're saying we don't have all the answers, Doctor." Winters admitted, "But what matters is that the connection between these children is therapeutic. Michael's progress is undeniable." After the doctors left, James found Robert on the terrace, watching as Emma pushed Michael's wheelchair around the garden, pointing out butterflies. "The doctors think Emma has a rare empathic ability," James said, joining him at the railing. Robert nodded. "Her mother was like that too. Could read people, know what they needed." The 2 men stood in silence, watching their children. "What happens now?" Robert finally asked. The summer bloomed around them, transforming the Blackwood estate into a lush paradise. In the newly installed therapeutic pool, Michael floated with the help of special equipment, his face turned toward the sun as Emma splashed nearby. His physical therapist, monitoring from the edge, gave James a thumbs up. "His core strength is improving," she reported. "The aquatherapy was an excellent suggestion." James nodded, though the pool had been Emma's idea. "Like mermaids," she had explained, "they can't walk either, but they're super strong swimmers." 3 months had passed since Emma Wilson had burst into their lives, and the changes were remarkable. Michael now operated his wheelchair independently, communicated more readily, and most significantly, had begun regaining some sensation in his upper legs, a development the doctors called unexpected, but not impossible. The arrangement between the families had evolved too. Robert had accepted a formal position managing the Blackwood estate, moving with Emma into the guest house on the property. It was a compromise that gave them independence while allowing Emma to be close to Michael. Harold had returned to New York, skeptical but unable to deny Michael's improvement. The medical team continued their assessments, documenting what Dr. Winters now called the Wilson-Blackwood case study, with strict confidentiality agreements in place. "Dad, watch this," Emma called, demonstrating an underwater handstand. James smiled, still sometimes struck by the natural way she had begun calling him Dad alongside Robert. It had started accidentally. "Look, Dad," she had shouted one day, then looked confused when both men responded. Now it seemed to fit this shared fatherhood. His phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Board meeting in 30 minutes. Video conference set up in your office." James sighed. The company had been running smoothly without his physical presence, but the board was growing restless about his extended family leave. "I need to take a call," he told Robert, who had emerged from the garden with fresh vegetables for dinner. Their relationship had warmed considerably as Robert's initial suspicion gave way to a guarded friendship. "Go ahead," Robert said. "We've got this covered." In his office, James connected to the video call to find the board members already assembled, Harold at the head of the virtual table. "James," his father nodded. "We were just discussing the Morgan acquisition." The business discussion proceeded smoothly until Harold introduced an unexpected agenda item. Now, regarding James's continued remote work arrangement. Elizabeth stepped in. "James has been fully engaged with operations. All performance metrics are exceeding targets." "Nevertheless," Harold continued, "his physical presence is required for certain aspects of leadership. The board proposes a structured return to the New York office, beginning next month." James felt a cold weight in his stomach. "That's not possible. Michael's treatment has progressed remarkably," Harold finished. "Which means you can begin transitioning back to your full responsibilities." "My son's health is my responsibility," James said firmly. Harold's expression softened slightly. "No one disputes that. But the company needs its CEO present, 3 days a week in New York, with accommodation for Michael's treatment schedule." "It's a reasonable compromise." Before James could respond, a commotion erupted from the pool area, a splash, shouting, Robert's voice calling for help. James was running before conscious thought, heart pounding. He burst onto the terrace to find Robert pulling Michael from the pool, the boy's body limp. The therapist was already performing CPR. "He just slipped underwater," Emma cried, shivering in a towel. "I tried to pull him up, but he's too heavy." Paramedics arrived with dizzying speed. As they loaded Michael into the ambulance, James turned to Robert. "Take care of Emma. I'll go with Michael." At the hospital, time slowed to an excruciating crawl. Michael had aspirated water, developed respiratory distress. The doctors worked efficiently, stabilizing him, but the incident had been serious. "He's stable now," the emergency physician finally reported, "but given his compromised condition and the respiratory insult, we want to keep him for observation." James sat beside Michael's bed, watching his son's chest rise and fall with the help of supplemental oxygen. The fragility of their progress, of Michael's life, had never felt more stark. Hours later, Robert arrived with Emma, who had been inconsolable until allowed to see Michael. Now she stood beside his bed, unusually subdued. "I should have been watching more carefully," the therapist had said, devastated by the incident. But James knew accidents happened, especially with children. The real question was whether he could balance Michael's needs with his professional obligations, and whether returning to New York would jeopardize the delicate support system they had built. As if reading his thoughts, Robert said quietly, "Elizabeth called, filled me in about the board meeting." James nodded, too exhausted for pretense. "They want me back in New York. What will you do?" Before James could answer, Emma spoke up from Michael's bedside. "He's dreaming about the water," she said. "He's not scared anymore." Both men turned to her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" and Robert asked. "In his dream, he was sinking, but then he wasn't scared. He saw." Emma frowned, concentrating. "A lady with yellow hair, like the pictures in his room. She told him it wasn't time yet." The lights of Manhattan glittered below. As James stood at the window of his penthouse apartment, phone pressed to his ear. "How's his fever?" he asked, tension evident in his voice. "Down to 99.2, Robert reported. "Dr. Matthews says the respiratory infection is responding to the antibiotics." James exhaled slowly. "And he's eating." Emma got him to take some soup at dinner. She told him a story about a knight who had to eat magic soup to fight dragons. Despite his worry, James smiled. It had been 2 weeks since the pool incident, and though Michael had recovered from the near drowning, he had developed a subsequent infection that left him weakened. It was Emma, as always, who seemed most able to coax him through the difficult days. "I'll fly back tomorrow morning," James said. "The board meeting will be finished by noon." "No need to rush," Robert assured him. "We've got things under control here." Harold called to check in too. The mention of his father surprised James. Harold had been unexpectedly supportive since Michael's hospitalization, even backing James's modified schedule. 3 days in New York, 4 in Boston with Michael. "Get some rest," Robert advised. "Michael's in good hands." After ending the call, James poured himself a scotch and reviewed his presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. The words blurred before his tired eyes. He'd been pushing himself to the limit, maintaining his corporate responsibilities while constantly monitoring Michael's condition from afar. His phone chimed with a text from Emma, or rather, from Robert's phone on Emma's behalf. "Mikey says good night, Daddy. He's being super brave with his medicine." And attached was a photo of Michael giving a thumbs up from his bed, Emma beside him with an identical gesture. James felt the now familiar tug in his chest. In just a few months, these two had become as essential to him as his own family. The boundaries between them had blurred, creating something new, not a replacement for what he had lost with Sarah, but a different kind of connection, unexpected and precious. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Elizabeth stood in the hallway, holding a stack of folders. "Sorry to bother you so late, but these need your signature before tomorrow's meeting." "Come in," James waved her inside. They had worked late together countless times over the years, but tonight her presence felt like an intrusion on his thoughts of home. And home now decisively meant the Boston estate with Michael, Emma, and Robert. Not this sterile Manhattan penthouse. "How's Michael?" Elizabeth asked, arranging the documents on his desk. "Improving. The infection's responding to treatment." Elizabeth nodded, her expression softening. "And the girl, Emma." "Being Emma," James said, unable to suppress a smile. telling stories, making Michael laugh, somehow knowing exactly what he needs before he knows it himself. "You've grown attached to her," Elizabeth observed, "to both of them." James met her gaze. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all," she said carefully. "It's just a significant change. 6 months ago, you were—" She hesitated. "A shell of myself," James finished, "drowning in grief and work." Elizabeth nodded. "And now you have this unconventional family arrangement. It's good to see you engaged with life again." James sipped his scotch, considering her words. "It is unconventional," he acknowledged, "but it works. Michael is thriving with Emma in his life." "And what about you?" Elizabeth asked quietly. "Are you thriving, James?" The question caught him off guard. He had been so focused on Michael's needs, on managing the delicate balance between the families, that he had scarcely considered his own transformation. "I think I am," he realized aloud. "For the first time since Sarah died, I'm looking forward instead of back." Elizabeth smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. "Then hold on to that, no matter what the board or anyone else says." After she left, James returned to the window, watching the city lights. His phone chimed again, another text from Robert. "Emma had another dream about Sarah tonight. Asked me to tell you that the sunflower lady says not to worry so much. Thought you should know." James stared at the message, a chill running through him. They had never told Emma that Sarah called Michael her little sunflower. It was a private endearment, not shared outside the immediate family. Yet somehow, Emma knew. The next morning, James was halfway through his board presentation when his private phone vibrated. Robert never called during board meetings unless it was an emergency. James excused himself, stepping into the hallway. "What's wrong?" he asked, without preamble. "It's Emma." Robert's voice was tight with worry. "She collapsed during breakfast. She's running a high fever, delirious. The ambulance is on its way." "What happened?" "Was she sick yesterday?" "No symptoms at all. She was fine. And then suddenly, James, she was talking to Michael, and then she just said, 'Something's wrong,' and passed out. Michael is hysterical. He keeps saying, 'It's happening again.'" James was already moving toward the elevator. "I'm on my way. Which hospital are they taking her to?" "Boston Children's." "James." Robert's voice broke. She was saying Sarah's name before she lost consciousness. The pediatric intensive care unit was eerily quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Emma lay small and pale against the hospital sheets, her honey-blonde hair spread across the pillow. Robert sat beside her, his large, work-roughened hand gently holding her tiny one. Across the room, James stood with Dr. Winters and the infectious disease specialist who had been called in. "All her tests are coming back inconclusive," the specialist reported, frustration evident in her tone. "The infection markers are elevated, but we can't identify a specific pathogen. It's as if her body is fighting something we can't see." "Could it be related to Michael's infection?" James asked. "They spend almost every waking hour together." "Different presentation entirely," the doctor shook her head. "Michael had a clear respiratory infection following aspiration pneumonia. Emma's symptoms are more systemic, almost like an autoimmune response." Dr. Winters had been unusually quiet, his expression troubled. "There is another possibility we should consider," he said carefully. "In cases of extreme empathic connection, there have been documented instances of psychosomatic manifestations, physical symptoms without physical cause." Robert's head snapped up. "You're saying she's imagining being sick? Look at her." "Not imagining," Dr. Winters clarified. "Her symptoms are quite real. But the trigger may be psychological rather than pathogenic. Emma's connection to Michael is extraordinary. When he was ill, she may have internalized his distress to a degree that manifested physically." "That's absurd," Robert said flatly. Dr. Winters sighed. Mr. Wilson, over the past few months, we've documented numerous instances where Emma has displayed knowledge or perceptions she couldn't possibly have through ordinary means. Her connection to Michael, and possibly to Sarah Blackwood's memory, defies conventional explanation. So now my daughter is what? Psychic? Possessed? Robert stood, anger radiating from him. Instead of looking for real medical answers, you're turning this into some supernatural phenomenon. Robert, James intervened, no one's suggesting anything supernatural, but Emma is. Different. Special. We've all seen it. She's a child, Robert said, his voice breaking. My child. Not a medical curiosity. Not a miracle. Just a little girl who's fighting for her life while doctors spout theories instead of finding treatments. Before anyone could respond, Emma stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Daddy, she whispered. Robert was instantly at her side. I'm here, sweetheart, right here. Emma's eyes opened, unfocused at first, then clearing. Not you, Daddy, she murmured. Other Daddy. He's sad. James felt the room tilt slightly. He moved to the opposite side of Emma's bed, taking her other hand. I'm here too, Emma. Don't be sad, she said, her voice stronger now. I saw her again, the Sunflower Lady. She's helping me get better. Robert and James exchanged glances over Emma's bed. Emma, Dr. Winters said gently, moving closer. Can you tell us about the Sunflower Lady? Emma nodded weakly. She looks like me, but grown up. She says she's watching over Mikey, and me too now. Her brow furrowed. She says I'm not supposed to know her yet, but sometimes things get mixed up. Mixed up how, sweetheart? Robert asked, stroking her hair. Like when you see something before it happens, or remember something from later. Emma's explanation was faltering, childlike. She says it's like when puzzle pieces get put in the wrong box. Doctor. Winters was taking notes, his expression intense. Emma, when did you start seeing the Sunflower Lady? When I met Mikey, Emma said simply. She was standing behind his wheelchair. She looked sad because he was crying. That's why I gave him my sandwich. James felt a chill run through him. You saw her in my office? That first day? Emma nodded. She told me his name was Mikey, not Michael, and that he liked peanut butter sandwiches cut in triangles, not squares. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. Finally, Dr. Winters spoke. I think we should let Emma rest now. Her fever's coming down, which is a good sign. In the hallway outside Emma's room, the three men huddled in tense conference. This goes beyond empathic connection, Dr. Winters said quietly. What Emma is describing sounds like... Don't say it, Robert interrupted. Whatever theory you're about to propose, just don't. We need to consider all possibilities, the doctor insisted. Emma's condition, her knowledge, her connection to Michael, and yes, potentially to Sarah, these may all be aspects of the same phenomenon. Which is what exactly? James asked. Dr. Winters hesitated. There's a concept in quantum physics called entanglement. When particles interact, they become connected in ways that transcend normal physical limitations. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that consciousness might operate on similar principles. So you're saying my daughter's consciousness is, what? Entangled with your dead wife's? Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm saying there are aspects of human experience that science is only beginning to understand, Dr. Winters replied. Whatever is happening with Emma, it's extraordinary. Autumn painted the Boston public garden in fiery hues as James pushed Michael's wheelchair along the winding paths. Behind them, Robert and Emma walked hand in hand, the girl now fully recovered from her mysterious illness. 3 weeks had passed since her hospitalization, weeks filled with additional tests, consultations, and ultimately few concrete answers. The swan boats are all gone, Michael observed, pointing to the lagoon where the famous boats operated during warmer months. They'll be back in spring, James assured him, just like the real swans. Emma skipped ahead, then turned back. "Can we get hot chocolate? There's a stand by the bridge." The normalcy of the moment, a family outing on a crisp fall day, belied the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. After Emma's recovery, the two families had fallen into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Robert managed the estate with quiet competence. James balanced his corporate responsibilities with family life. The children continued their unconventional therapy sessions, Michael making steady progress under Emma's intuitive guidance. Dr. Winters and his team maintained their research, documenting what they now carefully termed interconnected consciousness phenomena, though they had backed away from more esoteric theories in the face of Robert's fierce protectiveness. At the hot chocolate stand, Robert handed Emma her cup with a careful warning about the temperature. James helped Michael navigate the drinking straw through his adaptive cup holder. These small coordinations had become second nature, the four of them functioning as a unit. "Halloween's coming," Emma announced, chocolate mustache adorning her upper lip. "Can Mikey and I have matching costumes?" "What did you have in mind?" Robert asked. "Astronauts, because Mikey's wheelchair can be part of the spaceship." James felt the familiar warmth spread through him. Emma's ability to incorporate Michael's disability into something positive never failed to move him. "I think that's a great idea. We'll need to start planning." "I already drew pictures," Emma said confidently, "and made a list of supplies." As the children discussed costume details, Robert moved closer to James. "We need to talk," he said quietly, "about the future." James nodded. They had been avoiding this conversation, enjoying the stability of recent weeks. But certain realities couldn't be postponed indefinitely. "Tonight, after they're asleep," James agreed. Later, in James's study, the two men sat with drinks in hand. The fire crackled in the hearth, pushing back the autumn chill. "Michael's school has been asking when he'll return," James began. "His private tutoring has kept him on track academically but socially." "Emma's school has concerns too," Robert said. "She's missed a lot of days, and there have been incidents." James raised an eyebrow questioningly. "She's been telling stories about Sarah, about things she couldn't know." Robert swirled the whiskey in his glass. "Her teacher called me in for a conference. Wanted to know if there were unusual circumstances at home." "What did you tell her?" Robert gave a hollow laugh. "What could I say? That my daughter has some inexplicable connection to a woman who died before Emma ever met her son? That sometimes Emma says things in Sarah's voice?" He shook his head. "I said we have a unique family arrangement and left it at that." James leaned back, considering. "We could look at private schools, somewhere that might be more flexible with our situation." "And that's the other thing," Robert said, setting down his glass. "What exactly is our situation, James? We've been living in this strange limbo for months now. I work for you. Our children are inseparable. We function like a family, but we're... What? Employer and employee? Co-parents? Friends?" The question hung in the air between them. James had asked himself the same thing countless times, never reaching a satisfactory answer. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "All I know is that it works. Michael is happier and healthier than he's been since the accident. Emma is extraordinary. And you've become someone I trust with the most important things in my life." Robert nodded slowly. "But it's not sustainable, is it? Not like this. Eventually the children will need normal lives, school, friends, a clear understanding of who they are to each other." "Are you saying you want to leave?" James felt a spike of anxiety at the thought. "No," Robert said quickly. "That's not what I'm saying. Emma would be devastated. So would Michael. So would I," he added quietly. "But we need to define this, whatever it is, for everyone's sake." Before James could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. "Mikey had a bad dream." Both men turned to find Emma in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "How do you know?" Robert asked gently. I had it too, Emma said simply. About the car crash. The one that hurt Mikey and took his mom away. James felt his heart constrict. The accident had never been discussed in detail with Emma. He's scared, Emma continued. Can we all sleep in the big room tonight, like a sleepover? The men exchanged glances. Their serious conversation deferred yet again by the children's immediate needs. Of course, James said, standing. Let's go check on Michael. As they followed Emma upstairs, Robert murmured, This is what I mean. How do we explain this to others? To them, eventually. James had no answer. In the dim hallway, Emma's small figure led them forward, her certainty untroubled by the questions that plagued the adults. In Michael's room, they found him awake, tears on his cheeks. I saw the crash, he whispered as James sat on the edge of his bed. Mom was trying to turn the wheel. It was just a dream, James soothed, though he felt a chill. The accident had happened while Michael was at school. He hadn't been in the car when Sarah died. It wasn't just a dream, Emma said, climbing onto the foot of Michael's bed. It was a memory, but not Mikey's memory. It got mixed up again. Snow blanketed the Blackwood estate, transforming the gardens into a pristine white landscape. Inside, warmth radiated from the grand fireplace in the living room, where a towering Christmas tree sparkled with lights and ornaments. Emma stood on tiptoes, carefully hanging a handmade decoration, a sunflower crafted from yellow paper. Higher, Michael directed from his wheelchair. He pointed to a bare spot near the top. It should go there, with the other special ones. Emma stretched as far as she could, but the spot remained just beyond her reach. Allow me, Harold Blackwood said, appearing behind her. The family patriarch lifted Emma easily, holding her up so she could place the sunflower exactly where Michael wanted it. Perfect, Michael declared with satisfaction. Harold set Emma down gently, his initial skepticism about the child long since replaced by a grandfatherly affection. 6 months had transformed many things, including Harold's perspective on the unconventional family that had formed around his son and grandson. In the kitchen, James and Robert worked side by side, preparing Christmas Eve dinner, moving around each other with the easy coordination of people accustomed to sharing space. Board approved the Wilson Foundation funding this morning, James mentioned, chopping vegetables. Full endowment. The Children's Medical Research Center breaks ground in February. Robert nodded, checking the turkey. Emma's excited about being a junior research assistant. She's been practicing saying empathic neuroplasticity all week. James smiled. The foundation, dedicated to studying the unique healing connections between children like Emma and Michael, had been their solution to several problems at once. It provided a framework for the ongoing research Dr. Winters wanted to conduct. It gave their unusual family arrangement a public-facing purpose. And it created a future where Emma's extraordinary abilities could be understood as a gift rather than an oddity. The private school in Cambridge accepted both of them for January, James added. Their dual enrollment program should work perfectly with the foundation schedule. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of cooking and distant Christmas music from the living room. So much had changed since that first chaotic meeting in James's office. Michael now attended regular physical therapy, showing remarkable improvement in upper body strength and even some promising neural response in his legs. Emma had channeled her intuitive abilities into more structured activities, working with Dr. Winters to understand and develop her unique gifts. And the two men had found an equilibrium that worked, Robert maintaining his independence while accepting his place in the expanded Blackwood family, James learning to share both parenting and decision-making with someone who approached life from a different perspective. Sarah would have loved this, James said quietly, the house full of people. Michael laughing again. Robert glanced at him. These acknowledgements of Sarah's continued presence in their lives had become easier over time. "Sophie too," he replied. "She always wanted a big family." The mention of Emma's mother no longer brought tension. Whatever mysterious connection existed between Sarah Blackwood and Emma Wilson, whether quantum entanglement, spiritual presence, or simply extraordinary empathy, they had learned to accept it as part of their shared reality. Elizabeth arrived with an armload of presents, followed by Dr. Winters and several members of Michael's medical team who had become fixtures in their extended family circle. The house filled with voices and laughter, the isolation that had defined James and Michael's life after Sarah's death, now a distant memory. As evening approached, Emma tugged at James's sleeve. "It's time for the special present," she whispered urgently. James nodded, catching Robert's eye across the room. They had prepared for this moment, though both still harbored doubts about whether it was the right decision. "Everyone," James called, gathering the group around the tree. "Michael and Emma have something they've been working on. A Christmas surprise." The room quieted as Robert positioned Michael's wheelchair in the open space near the fireplace. Emma stood beside him, unusually solemn. "Ready?" she asked Michael, who nodded determinedly. With careful movements, Michael released the safety belt of his wheelchair. Emma stood ready at his side, her small hands poised to support him. Dr. Matthews, Michael's physical therapist, moved closer but remained at a distance, honoring the children's desire to do this themselves. Slowly, with Emma's guidance, Michael shifted his weight forward. Using the specialized braces fitted to his legs and the walker positioned before him, he began to rise from the wheelchair. A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. James felt Robert's hand grip his arm tightly. Inch by inch, Michael pulled himself upright, his face flushed with effort, sweat beading on his forehead. Emma maintained her position, offering minimal but crucial support. When he finally stood, balanced between the walker and Emma's steadying presence, Michael's face broke into a radiant smile. "Merry Christmas, Dad," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. James couldn't speak, tears streaming unchecked down his face. After 2 years of doctors saying Michael would never stand again, the sight of his son upright, however briefly, however assisted, was nothing short of miraculous. Harold moved to James's side, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Sarah would be so proud," he murmured. As if in response to the name, a strange, fleeting expression crossed Emma's face, a look older than her years, serene and knowing. For just a moment, the resemblance to Sarah was so striking that several people in the room drew sharp breaths. Then it passed, and she was just Emma again, beaming with pride at Michael's accomplishment. 3 steps, she encouraged him. "Remember what we practiced?" With painful slowness, Michael shifted his right foot forward. The room held its collective breath as he laboriously completed 1 step, then another, and finally a 3rd, before his strength gave out. Robert moved quickly to help Emma guide Michael safely back to his wheelchair, the boy exhausted but triumphant. The room erupted in applause and exclamations. Dr. Matthews was already discussing implications for Michael's treatment plan, his voice excited. Harold was on his phone, undoubtedly sharing the news with family members who couldn't be present. In the joyful chaos, James found himself standing between Robert and the children, a tableau that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Emma looked up at him, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "The Sunflower Lady says, 'This is just the beginning,'" she said quietly, so only James could hear. "She says sometimes miracles look like accidents, and sometimes families find each other in the strangest ways." James knelt to embrace both children, his heart too full for words. Whatever mystery had brought them together, whatever connection linked Sarah's memory to Emma's intuition, he was done questioning it. Some gifts, he had learned, were meant to be accepted with gratitude rather than understood.